You have been deliberately misled about a fundamental chemical reaction. This is a microscopic process that the automotive and chemical industries have weaponized against your wallet. When rust begins to form inside a fuel tank or on the surface of a critical metal component, the modern consumer is conditioned to believe that the item is either permanently compromised or requires an immense financial investment to salvage. Every single day, thousands of structurally sound motorcycle tanks, vintage car parts, and heavy machinery components are thrown into scrap bins. When you take a corroded fuel tank to a dealership or a certified mechanic, they will not offer to restore it. They will immediately generate an invoice for a complete replacement, demanding hundreds or even thousands of dollars in parts and specialized labor. If you try to avoid the dealership and visit a retail auto parts store, you are greeted by shelves lined with brightly colored bottles of chemical rust converters and aggressive acids, usually priced around $30 for a tiny quantity. These products promise a miraculous overnight cure. You pour them in, the rust turns black, and you believe your problem is solved. But 6 months later, the engine sputters, the fuel filters clog with orange dust, and you realize you are back exactly where you started. You have not been provided a solution. You have been sold a subscription to a continuous cycle of mechanical failure. The entire system is engineered to keep you trapped in this loop of recurring revenue. But this loop is built on a calculated omission of historical and scientific fact. The absolute molecular eradication of rust does not require harsh industrial acids, dangerous sandblasting, or expensive replacement parts. It requires exactly $3, a basic understanding of an organic chemical reaction, and a trip to a rural farm supply store. Before deconstructing the exact methodology and the suppressed historical documents that make this possible, look at your own garage or workshop. If you have a rusted fuel tank, a corroded tool, a seized mechanical part, or any piece of metal that is currently sitting useless because the cost of replacement is too high, drop the word broken in the comments right now. We need to create a public, undeniable ledger of exactly how many people are being actively drained by this manufactured complexity. The sheer volume of perfectly good metal being discarded based on corporate lies is staggering, and your comment serves as data against their narrative. To break free from this cycle, you must first understand the anatomy of the deception you are purchasing. When you buy a commercial rust converter, you are buying a chemical illusion. These over-the-counter products are almost universally based on weak solutions of phosphoric acid or tannic acid. When you apply these acids to iron oxide, a rapid, superficial reaction occurs. The surface layer of the rust violently reacts and forms a black crust, chemically known as iron phosphate or iron tannate. The product label tells you that the rust has been neutralized and is now a protective polymeric coating. This is a scientific half-truth, and it is highly profitable. That hard black crust only penetrates a fraction of a millimeter. Beneath that hardened shell, the microscopic topography of the original iron oxide remains completely intact, hungry for oxygen and moisture. The chemical manufacturers know perfectly well that metal undergoes thermal expansion. An engine block heats up and cools down. A motorcycle tank sits in the baking sun and then the freezing night. During these microscopic expansions and contractions, the brittle black crust of the converted rust fractures. Invisible microfissures open up across the surface. Ambient atmospheric moisture immediately enters these fissures, bypasses the protective shell, and begins to feed the active iron oxide trapped underneath. The cancer spreads silently beneath the surface until the entire black crust flakes off, flooding your fuel lines with debris. You blame yourself, assuming you did not prep the surface correctly, and you go back to the store to buy another $30 bottle. This is the part where the numbers become uncomfortable. When you examine the industry data, the scope of this financial harvesting becomes clear. According to an extensive market analysis published by IBISWorld in the year 2023, the auto parts and repair sector generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually. A massive foundational pillar of that revenue is the replacement and temporary servicing of components that suffer from environmental degradation. Dealerships and chemical giants rely on the planned obsolescence of their own repair products. If a $30 bottle permanently cured the oxidation, the recurring revenue stream would instantly evaporate. Stay with me, because what I am about to show you completely bypasses this modern retail trap by utilizing a declassified military protocol that is over 70 years old. In the year 1946, the United States Department of the Navy faced a logistical crisis of unprecedented proportions. Following the end of the Second World War, the military needed to deactivate, preserve, and store thousands of warships, submarines, aircraft, and countless tons of heavy machinery. This initiative became known as the mothball fleet. The sheer surface area of steel that needed to be protected from ocean air was incomprehensible. The Navy could not afford to use temporary acid converters that would fail in 6 months, and they obviously could not replace miles of internal piping and massive ballast tanks. They required a method of absolute, permanent molecular eradication of iron oxide that would preserve the base metal indefinitely. The naval engineers did not turn to the synthetic, volatile acids sold in stores today. Instead, they weaponized a naturally occurring biological process. They utilized specific organic compounds to initiate a process called chelation. This procedure was meticulously detailed in a 1946 declassified maintenance protocol regarding chelating agents in naval preservation. They buried the science. We dig it up. To understand why chelation is the ultimate enemy of the modern auto parts industry, you must understand how it differs from commercial rust removal. Modern methods rely on two destructive forces: mechanical abrasion or acid etching. If you sandblast a delicate fuel tank, you are aggressively tearing away the microscopic peaks and valleys of the healthy base metal along with the rust. You thin the structural walls and alter the metal fatigue limits. If you use a harsh industrial acid, like hydrochloric or muriatic acid, you induce a phenomenon known as hydrogen embrittlement, where hydrogen atoms penetrate the steel lattice, making it brittle and prone to catastrophic cracking. Chelation does none of this. The word chelation is derived from the Greek word for claw. A chelating agent is an organic molecule that acts with surgical precision. It ignores healthy steel entirely. Instead, it mathematically targets the iron ions that have bonded with oxygen. The chelating molecules wrap around the iron oxide, physically break the oxygen bond, and pull the rust particle into a liquid suspension. It is not an acid burning the metal. It is a biological kidnapping of the rust. A landmark study published in the Journal of Applied Chemistry in the year 1952 on the acidic degradation of iron oxide confirmed that organic chelation leaves the base carbon steel 100% intact, stripping the surface back to a factory-fresh microscopic state without removing a single micron of unoxidized iron. The discrepancy is glaring. If this organic process is chemically superior, structurally safer, and permanently effective, why has no mechanic ever recommended it? Why is it not packaged and sold at every dealership in the country? The answer is the foundation of all corporate monopolies. You cannot patent a basic agricultural byproduct, and what you cannot patent, you cannot build a billion-dollar industry on. The raw materials required to generate a massive chelating bath cost literally pennies per gallon to manufacture. They did not hide it because it failed. They hid it because it worked too well. Providing the consumer with a virtually free, permanent solution destroys the economic model of replacement parts and chemical subscriptions. If you made it this far, you already know more about the molecular physics of corrosion and corporate market manipulation than 99% of consumers on the road. Subscribe to this channel and share this analysis immediately. We are documenting methods that directly threaten the profit margins of massive industries. Your active participation is required to protect this knowledge and ensure it remains accessible to those who need it. We must now extract this military science from the archives and adapt it for immediate execution in your garage. The specific organic chelating agent utilized in those mid-century industrial applications is heavily present in a very specific, raw agricultural byproduct. We're talking about raw, unsulfured agricultural molasses, specifically the heavy, unrefined liquid grade used for feeding livestock and horses. When this dense, dark liquid is heavily diluted with water in a precise ratio, it creates an environment where specific organic acids, primarily chelating agents, begin to slowly and aggressively dismantle iron oxide. But here is the critical distinction that separates failure from success. You cannot go to a grocery store and buy baking molasses or pancake syrup. The commercial food industry chemically alters, refines, and often adds sulfur to consumer products as a preservative. This industrial processing neutralizes the specific organic acids required for the chemical reaction. You must acquire the raw, untreated feed-grade material. You can purchase a 1-gallon jug of this dense agricultural liquid at virtually any rural farm and tractor supply store for roughly $3. 1 gallon of this raw material will produce 10 gallons of highly active industrial-grade chelating solution. But here's the part nobody tells you. And this is where almost everyone who attempts this fails miserably. Most people who discover this reaction do it completely wrong and end up ruining their metal components forever. They submerge their rusted part, watch the rust disappear, pull the wet, bare steel out of the liquid, and leave it on a workbench to dry. That is a fatal error. Here is the single missing step that guarantees a permanent restoration. When the chelating process strips the metal down to its bare molecular foundation, that steel is in a state of extreme vulnerability. The microscopic pores of the metal are wide open and highly reactive. If you expose that wet, raw steel to the oxygen in the ambient atmosphere without an immediate chemical barrier, it will undergo a violent reaction called flash rusting. Within 5 minutes, the entire surface will turn bright orange, often worse than before you started. Here is the exact, unredacted protocol for execution. First, secure your heavy agricultural mix. Next, prepare your vessel. If you are cleaning an entire motorcycle fuel tank, the tank itself is your vessel. Remove the petcock and seal the bottom orifices securely. The required chemical ratio is exactly 1 part of the agricultural liquid to 9 parts of hot water. The thermal energy in the hot water is a critical catalyst. It decreases the viscosity of the raw liquid and accelerates the initial biological breakdown. Pour the raw liquid in first, then forcefully add the hot water to ensure complete homogenization of the mixture. Fill the tank or the external container to the absolute brim. You must ensure that no air pockets remain, as the reaction requires total liquid submersion to prevent atmospheric interference. Once submerged, you must exercise something the modern consumer lacks, which is absolute patience. This is not a violent, foaming chemical burn that happens in 10 minutes. This is a methodical, relentless biological dismantling of molecular bonds. Depending on the ambient temperature of your garage and the severity of the structural oxidation, the total eradication process will take anywhere from 3 days to 2 full weeks. Let the science work. Do not disturb the bath. You will know the chelation is operating at maximum efficiency when a thick, gray organic mold or foam begins to form across the surface of the liquid. This is not rotting food. This is the visual, physical evidence of billions of iron oxide molecules being violently ripped from the steel and suspended in the aqueous solution. When you determine sufficient time has passed, carefully drain the dark liquid. It is entirely non-toxic, biodegradable, and poses no threat to groundwater, unlike commercial automotive acids. As the liquid drains, you will see the rust simply wash away like loose mud. The internal steel will be a stark, bare, factory gray. Now, you must execute the missing step with absolute speed. Do not let the metal air dry. Immediately flush the internal cavity or the external component with massive amounts of hot water to wash away any remaining organic residue. The moment the water is drained, you must displace the moisture and seal the open microscopic pores. For a fuel tank, Immediately pour in a heavy concentration of water, displacing oil, penetrating lubricant, or two-stroke engine oil, and violently rotate the tank to coat every single square inch of the interior. If you are preparing the tank for a permanent epoxy liner, use denatured alcohol to rapidly evaporate the water instead of oil, and immediately apply the chemical liner. The barrier must be established within seconds of the final rinse. Executing this protocol weaponizes agricultural waste and declassified naval engineering to permanently reverse molecular decay. You have completely bypassed an incredibly lucrative supply chain designed to extract your wealth. You did not buy their temporary acids. You did not pay their dealership labor rates. You spent $3 and achieved a state of permanent material preservation that the automotive industry claims is impossible. They want you reliant on their network of manufactured failure. But their system only works if you remain ignorant of the chemistry they try to suppress. You now possess the architectural blueprint for permanent restoration. Step outside the cycle and use it.